beneficent, the merciful, may his peace and blessings be upon our holy Prophet Muhammad and also upon his purified progeny. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, respected brothers and sisters in faith in the walayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Convertsation, the TV program in which we discuss the daily issues and challenges and struggles faced by converts to the religion of Islam. Join me, Daniel Pizer, and my co-host Sheikh Yahya Seymour as we continue discussing issues related to the convert experience during Ramadan. In particular, we were discussing the problem of convert loneliness, or the Ramadan blues, or whatever you want to call it, that can set in. I think in some ways it's a bit like, I don't know if this is a popular phenomenon in the UK yet, but the US, a big thing is seasonal affective disorder.
We don't have any.
It's called SAD. It's a nice acronym for it. But
Sounds sad to me.
basically it means in the winter time, because of like reduced sunlight and whatever, that you see like a slight uptick in
Suicide?
inshallah, I hope not, but maybe. No, depression. It's
very common
seasonal
in
depression.
Scandinavia,
Yeah,
not
I'm
so
sure.
common in UK.
I guess my point in bringing it up, to get away from the suicide topic, was the issue of the loneliness that converts feel around Ramadan, that it can be kind of a slightly both spiritually beneficial but also kind of sad time of year. And in the last few episodes of our Ramadan specials, what we discussed were sort of various events that converts might be able to attend at centers, and ways that centers might sort of tailor programming slightly or adjust it a little bit more so that it's welcoming to everyone, regardless of either their ethnic or national background, or whether they were born Muslim or not. Sure. And we also spoke in one of the previous episodes, the one immediately before this, about the issue of those who are not connected to communities, and that they, in many cases, have the most difficult time of all, because they're not connected with communities, don't have events to go to, don't have majalis that they can attend. But at the same time, they may also have some additional opportunities to gain nearness to Allah Azza because of perhaps they live in a rural area, they're more exposed to nature, things like this. So in some ways, there's, I guess the expression, when God closes a door, he opens a window kind of thing, that it provides some additional opportunities that they might not otherwise have. Sure. In order to gain nearness to God during this blessed month. However, again, the challenges are still fairly extreme. And I gave an example of someone I know from, through friends anyway, from my home state. I guess today we just wanted to continue kind of fleshing out the issues of challenges that are faced during the season of Ramadan, and also how converts in particular can maximize the benefits of the month, because by the end of the month, for most people anyway, it seems like the month has really flown by, even though maybe sure. On a day-by-day basis it may seem difficult at times, and for some people especially who have some kind of conditions that make fasting more difficult for them. Yeah. So one thing actually I wanted to bring up in relation to this was that converts, because they want so much to connect with the religion, particularly if they're new Muslims, that in some cases they will actually push themselves into fasting when medically they should not be fasting.
Sure. It's not just converts that do this, even very devout religious Muslims. One of the brothers who was with us in the house here, who's from the States as well, and a great khatib in the English language, he told me when he first came to Karbala in the month of Ramadan, he was traveling, and he was based in another city in Iraq whilst visiting the city. Despite the scorching heat, he had genuinely attempted to not have to give up his fast until he realized that it would be more haram for him to do so, because he was really affecting his health. Yeah. In order to continue and maintain that fast.
But I think at least in communities I've been in, I think there's a lot of people treat it with a greater sense of leniency. Maybe they err too much on the side of,
Sure.
of not fasting. So yeah, I could see how it would be not certainly not an exclusively convert problem, but I certainly have heard of cases through family or other people, friends, of converts who push themselves to fast even though they may be diabetic or have other kinds of problems, which
Sure.
doesn't exclude you from fasting necessarily, but introduces some other exigencies, and they don't follow even maybe the advice of a doctor or other people
Sure.
who are not simply saying don't fast because they have some bias against the religion, but saying medically this is unwise for you. You have conditions X, Y, and Z.
And it could lead to this, for
Yeah,
example, or
exactly.
will lead to this, for example. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be very wary of these things. As you said, we need to be wary of the two sides of a coin, namely extremism in creating ease for yourself and saying, well, I can't fast. I've known people who, purely due to the fact that they've had to work in summer, have said, I can't fast in this heat. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm sorry, but Allah Azza wa Jal knew that, you know, there would be a community who have to fast in the UK, and well, the fact that it's in the UK again here is particularly concerning, because we would say that we don't even excuse people from fasting due to work here in Iraq, where there's a lack of electricity and the sun's much hotter than it would be.
It still baffles
in
me
Western
actually
Europe.
how people fast here in the summer.
Well, inshallah ta'ala, may Allah have mercy upon those of us who are here for the month of Ramadan. And then you have the other extreme of people who stubbornly choose to continue fasting, despite the fact it's clear that it's detrimental to their health.
I guess this is kind of what I'm what I'm referring to is when we discussed in even in some other episodes how when people convert to the religion, sometimes they try to do so much so quickly and become, you know, as Muslim as possible.
Yeah, I
And
think
that maybe this is-
certainly there are numerous factors which we could identify as being roots of that problem. I mean, just to point some insight into my own experience. From my own experience, I can remember that one habit I eventually picked up, which was not great, was the fact that I was an overly judgmental, overly aggressive, overly polemical Shi'i student. And you know, I'm sure the brothers in the UK know that fact about me very well. Like, it's something that got me into many problems with other brothers, issues, and it's something that kind of dominated my life, just going out and wanting to debate people for the sake of it, and holding extremist views just for the sake of it. Now, we can laugh at it, and we can condemn it with hindsight, and I do condemn it, certainly, and with hindsight I wish I had never done these things, but one thing we need to identify is the root of the symptom as to why so many converts end up this way. And the root of the symptom of that is because of the fact that we enter into the community and we're never good enough for accidental factors due to things like your race, where you were born, whether or not you were divorced before or not, even things like your gender, if you're a sister at times, but mainly the racial issue and the cultural issue, the fact that you are a convert. You feel the need to make up for that, and you feel the need to kind of be able to hold your own ground on some other basis. So what better basis than to find the most extreme, rarely believed in Shi'i position, but one which has nonetheless been held by Shi'i scholars, and to hold your ground and say, you guys are all the deficient ones. Who are you to judge me?
That's the. I mean, it's such a problem when you get into the game of everyone else is sort of is muqassir, right? Everyone else is falling short.
Sure.
In terms of, and this is a sad part, not even faith or practice, but just in terms of ideological position.
Absolutely.
This is actually something, the same type of debates I see happen in some of the centers I've been in particular, one of the centers that I would say that I hail from. If you go during Ramadan during the day, you find the group of people who are either retired or have some disability issues or other things. They're not working. And so they come to spend time in the Islamic Center, which is a great thing to do during Ramadan especially. but instead of it being like time that they're discussing Quran or whatever else, it sometimes becomes a time when they're having really heated debates, and sometimes around issues that we don't have any business discussing in the first place. Even if we get into issues periodically regarding the nature of God or other things like this, which are that doesn't happen too frequently. I don't want to. That's something that's I think happens
Allah
in youth
preserve
groups
us
more
all
often.
from discussing the nature of Allah Azza wa Jal, which is something forbidden by the Ahlul Bayt.
Categorically. I think the way I think of it is like if you ever go swimming in like a lake or the ocean or something, frequently they have buoys and lines of like flags and stuff marking the areas where you don't swim past that, because the waters are too deep and you're going to drown in it if you go out that far, or they're too rough, you know? And this is one of those areas, I think, where it's been fairly clearly demarcated, the area where we don't go past this point. That actually I find is more of a problem with youth, and probably is a subject for other episodes as well, which has to do with...
Well, we will be moving on to a series about converts and aqaid issues.
Yeah, exactly, and it falls, right, exactly, say, under the category of aqidah, I think. But that in particular can be a damaging way to spend the day during Ramadan. You want to avoid arguments as much as possible, and frequently they find you, or seem to find you, a lot more during that month.
Absolutely. Which is scary, because we know that the shaitan from amongst the iblis, the devil from the jinn, the shaitan from amongst the jinn, rather than the iblis, what I'm talking about, is locked up. Yeah. So we know that this is the human shayateen.
Exactly. This is our own devices at this point. And which is something we get to see, I guess I was going to say, during that month. The extent, and it's a lesson I hope we all take away, the extent to which, outside of the holy month of Ramadan, that it's not so much shaitan that's really the source of a lot of our problems, that we're the source of most of our problems, you know. That it's not so much a matter of shaitan coming and whispering something to do this, as much as you telling shaitan, I'm thinking of doing this, and shaitan's like, that sounds like a great idea to me, why don't you go ahead and do it, I'm not going to stop you. You know, and we have a tendency, some people anyway, to at least to blame a lot of their actions or their transgressions or shortcomings and things on shaitan. But I think just as problematic, though, is when we get on each other's cases about shortcomings or have these kinds of arguments, when time can be better spent, particularly during the month of Ramadan, in a reflective capacity, examining our own shortcomings, of which we have many, and frequently when we start going after other people for their shortcomings, those tend to be the shortcomings that maybe we possess in the greatest shares. So, in terms of maximizing the benefit of the month, of a month when we have sort of a storm of blessings, I guess, sort of raining down blessings, how do we, as converts, maximize that, and how do we work with our communities so that it's a more comfortable place to bring other converts? Because I think Ramadan's actually a very good time to introduce others and put forward the message of
certainly
mercy
a month
from
in
Ahlul
which the Ahlul Bayt have emphasized communal mercy, communal activity, and therefore we'd hope it would be a month in which the believers could congregate together regardless of their ethnic or cultural differences. I believe there needs to be a strong emphasis placed on this fact by our khatibs, by our speakers, by our community leaders. And I think one route to encourage such diversity is to yield the best out of the existing communities that we have. Namely, in the US and in the UK, there's not, yes, we might have communities which are predominantly gravitated to by certain ethnic groups, but at the same time, there's always going to be those one or two families which are not from that community. Why don't the community try and start a program, an initiative, where at the very least, if we're not serving iftar on a nightly basis, and if we're serving it every second day or the like, they try and add in some diversity. So not every day are they serving Iranian food or Pakistani food or Iraqi food. And more importantly than that, if they try and, as I said, organize community series of talks, organize community study circles, where they try and introduce a diversity to the community. And also, one thing that we benefited from quite heavily in Scotland, now of course this was a Sunni community, and I don't want to praise them for what they did, because at the same time they were engaging in the innovation of Taraweeh. But one thing they did before every Taraweeh was immediately after Maghrib prayers, shortly after everyone had had iftar, was they asked a community member to give a short 15-minute talk, even if they were a layperson. And they would often go out of their way to choose a convert. So we had a black American convert, ironically enough, living in Scotland. He used to teach Taekwondo. He was a martial artist, and that was his job. And we had people from vast ethnic diversities. And so each one would give a talk, and this way there would be a kind of community spirit introduced.
Well, the subjects would all be Ramadan related, or they?
Ramadan related, somehow related to spirituality. So praising a particular Sahabi in some cases, or praising an attribute such as patience, and how it relates to the Ramadan experience, so on and so forth.
I think, in my center in New York, that we don't do that then, although I remember during Muharram, actually, I think it was maybe my first Muharram, that I was asked to give some kind of lecture about something dealing with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Basically anything related to that. And I'm not one who's like a born public speaker or anything. So it was difficult, but it was also nice having that kind of encouragement.
Yeah, of course.
And that center, of course, as I've pointed out before, is a little unique in the sense that it is, there are a lot of converts or children of converts at that center. We only have a few more minutes before we go to break, but how would you say, and this is something we can come back to after, I'm sure, that the month of Ramadan allows us, as converts or new Muslims, to further integrate or cement kind of a holistic Islamic identity? Because something we talked about in episodes previous to the Ramadan specials as well, this issue of sort of reshaping identity, and that's very much the message of Islam in general, one of self-reform. Is there a special place within the month of Ramadan for converts in terms of using that time to reflect and take what's best out of their lives before and add something new without going too far in one direction or the other? Is it a time that can be used for that process of reconstructing identity?
I think it's a very good question you asked, and I think one of the things that we must point out here is that the month of Ramadan, whilst we will encourage this growth of identity in any month of the year of the Islamic calendar, and it exists certainly in Muharram, Arba'in, Ramadan is slightly different in that Muharram and Arba'in are dedicated specifically for the master of martyrs, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when we remember him, we remember certain traits that he and his companions had, hoping that we, through our grief, will learn to adopt those traits in our life. It's part of the psychology of grief. I'm sure you are a lot more familiar with it than I am, with your background. In terms of the month of Ramadan, it's different in the sense that we are dedicating everything for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And more importantly, we recognize that it is completely different from the other months in the sense that we feel the effects of Shahr Ramadan during the day. We feel the pains of having to endure the fast. We feel the difficulty in maintaining our patience during the month. And so when we return home, we often have this spiritual high, this spiritual buzz people speak about, which is often why you hear people saying, oh no, is Shahr Ramadan over already? Despite the fact that at the start of the month they might have been going, oh, it's so difficult. But they feel that the month just flies past, because it's no doubt because you're abstaining from the most filthy actions that we might normally, with great unfortune, be doing.
And then
any
return
other
to
day of the
after.
week. This is a sad thing, and
It's also part of human nature to
it's
some
part of
extent,
human
that
nature
we
to
relapse
a
into
degree.
old behaviors. Yeah.
They revert into this stuff.
The appropriate use of the word. Yeah.
But one thing I think we should highlight here is that Ramadan is the month of the Quran. And so I believe a program in which we familiarize ourselves with the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt about the Quran, familiarize ourselves with the tafsir, and more importantly, many of us forget. We know it deep down, but we forget it as an actual tangible reality. We think of it more as an abstract thing, as a myth, as a belief which we've kept. But it's actually a reality. The Imam of our time, may Allah hasten his reappearance, is someone who is living amongst us, is someone who is enduring the fast alongside us, and is someone who is guiding the community in his own unique way, which Allah Azza wa Jalla has planned for him. So why not through this month, as opposed to killing one bird with one stone, to use a very inappropriate analogy for this task, instead of just learning the Quran and developing a relationship with the Quran, let us develop a relationship with the Imam of our time and the Quran. How can we do this? By referring to books like Al-Qa'im fil Quran, in which we read the ayats of the Quran in light of the understanding given by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam as to which verses pertain to Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam.
We have to go to break for a minute. Inshallah, please stay with us. And when we return, we'll continue discussing the benefits that we can accrue as converts during the holy month of Ramadan. We'll be right to the Convertsation. Inshallah, I forgot to mention this before we went to break, but if you want to email us, usually our information is posted on screen. Inshallah, during the break it was posted on screen as well, and I wasn't too negligent in forgetting to mention that. When we went to break, we were discussing the issues faced during Ramadan for converts and new Muslims, which I guess is, I'm not sure which term I would go with there, because in some cases we're talking about people who converted 20 years ago who still have the same problems during Ramadan, because in 20 years the community hasn't changed that much, or they're new Muslims and are just beginning to encounter some of these things. You were talking, and I want to make sure we come back to this more, the issue of developing a relationship with the Imam of our time, peace be upon him, and I was thinking that was, unfortunately, advice we don't hear as much as we probably ought to. I can say, at least from my own experience, sadly in a lot of communities, the Imam is not treated as a present figure, and is also sort of, it may be sidelined in that way, or since he's in occultation, that it's just not something that's discussed as much. And as a result, I feel like it relates to the hadith about knowing the Imam of your time.
Sure.
Simply knowing the name or moniker, I feel like, is insufficient, surely, for that purpose. And so it's some area where, as communities in general, not just among converts, that we may fall short in that.
Mm. I think that it's certainly a point that we need to address, and I believe from my own experience that even me myself, I've been one of the biggest shortcomers when it comes to this issue of engaging in a relationship with the Imam of our time, and it's something that has come to be of the utmost importance to me recently, especially I would say when you have the development of cults coming out who come out and speak in the name of the Imam.
You mean like the Yamani or
that
Hassani or other
this
things? Like
guy
that?
from Basra who can't even speak proper Arabic and claims that he's the great grandson of the awaited savior of humanity, our occulted Imam. When you have such figures coming out, you realize that you really need a strong relationship with the Imam of your time. Even if it's as we said, premised upon that riwayah, من مات ولا يعرف إمام زمانه مات ميتا جاهلية. Whoever dies and does not have ma'rafah, who does not know the Imam of his time, will die a death of jahiliyyah. Now, there's numerous tafsirs that could be given to this riwayah, and I don't want to go into it, but we believe that the Imam of our time is very much present. He lives life in the community like us, merely due to the lack of opportunity given to him, due to our own shortcomings as a Shia community. He is unable to resurface and take the helm of leadership in the way that we would want him to. Of course, at the same time, the ulama have referred to him and his benefit during the time of the ghaiba as being like the sun behind the clouds. Now, of course, this in and of itself is subject to numerous interpretations. Allama Majlisi has dwelled quite heavily upon it. But what we would say about this is that the fact that they have placed such an importance on this, the fact that we have a living Imam, is what separates us from the rest of the religions of the world, in the sense that our Savior is very much alive. We may not benefit from him directly in the same sense that the previous Shia were able to benefit directly from the Imam of their time, but we still are in a requirement to develop a relationship.
Even Shia of previous times, though, especially particularly the later Imams, once you reach Imam Qadim, after that, it was very difficult for most Shia to have a relationship with their Imam or have access to him in the same way that it is for us now.
Of course, of course. Now, of course, especially back then, since they didn't have media opportunities such as opportunities of using telephones and emails and SMS and all that technology that we are now, alhamdulillah, blessed to have. But one thing we do need to take into consideration is the fact that, sadly, when we think about the Imam of our time, treat him as a relic. We treat him as a historical figure who belongs in books such as when we speak about the previous Imams as historical realities, we speak about him in the same way, not referring to the fact that he's very much alive, very much has the same obligations as us, if not more, and more importantly, we have obligations towards him, which are something we need to learn to cultivate.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times it becomes a fairly one-sided relationship, though, in the sense that the reason that life continues to function as normal for the most part on Earth is because of the existence of the Imam, whereas on our part, you know, we can't be bothered to recite
the reason his life continues to function in this occultation way is due to our failings. So
yeah, in the sense that it's prolonged and prolonged and prolonged. Yeah. Okay, so what about that then? What during Ramadan can we do, or can converts do in particular? What are sources of either knowledge about the Imam or closeness, actions that we can do that will bring us closer to him or in closer proximity?
Well, one way to know the Imam of our time is to familiarize ourselves with the tafsir of the Quran given by the Ahlul Bayt as pertaining to verses about him. Now, I agree very much with you that if I were to have read these verses at face value from the Mus'haf itself, I would never come to the conclusion that this is about the Imam.
You mean verses like, you know, when the water disappears, who will bring you your this kind of thing?
Absolutely. But once you read them in light of the fact that you now know this has been said, it is about Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, we come to appreciate these verses in a new light. We come to appreciate that, wow, this really does seem to be the true ta'wil. And when I read it in this way, it seems a lot more meaningful than that face value.
Well, because the Quran ceases to be just like a historical document at that point. Absolutely. Because we realize that parts of the Quran are not fulfilled yet.
Sure.
You know, there's some things that have happened, there's some things that speak to the present, and then there's elements of it that speak to things that have not occurred, that haven't come yet. You know, and I think it gives you a part of being part of consciously part of a living stream of history, in this sense, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until now, that we have some greater role, some greater place in that.
Sure. And there's many verses such as that I can think of that pertain particularly to the Imam according to the Imams. One of them, of course, being that the verse which states, "It is he who has sent his messenger with guidance and the deen of haqq to make it victorious over all other religions."
Right. which of course
Now-
Islam has not become victorious, nor was it at
Absolutely.
any point overall.
Absolutely.
of the
If anything,
religions.
Islam seems to be the humiliated religion in the world, and we Shias, out of all religious communities and nations, from a worldly perspective, seem to be very much humiliated in this world we are in today.
But and in a sense, I think this is because of our distance, perhaps, from the.
Absolutely, absolutely. But another method we could come to know about the Imam through is there are numerous narrations. Now, these narrations are authenticated by Sayyid Sadiq Shirazi in his book Abir al-Rahma, the
The
Aroma of
Aroma of
Mercy,
Mercy, you know.
which says that Al-Mahdi yasna'u kama sana'a Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Mahdi will act in the same way that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam acted. So through familiarizing ourselves with the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who again was the recipient of the Quran, received the Quran during the month of Ramadan, and sadly again is one of the most mavloom of the Masumeen in our community, we would again be able to familiarize ourselves with almost a strategic plan which might be employed by the Imam of our time when he returns.
So, in this sense, one method we can look at is by developing relationship with the Quran and Quranic tafsir. And we mentioned some titles of text previously that are useful for this. There's also, of course, even just focusing on existing translations we have in English. There's a couple of translations for ones like tafsir Imam al-Askari.
Yes,
alayhi salam.
published by Ansarian.
Yeah, there's one, and there's another one available online as well. That's a separate translation of the same one. Also, actually, with some additional references that are quite nice. But astaghfirullah, what was I going to say?
Allahumma
So-
salli ala Muhammad wa ala
I'll say that, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I think that this process of returning to the tafsir of the Imams is particularly important during that month, because normally so much emphasis, and we see this in other communities that are straying in some way, that there's a great emphasis even in those on reciting the entire Quran during the month. Not to take away from that, I think it's a beautiful practice. A lot of centers have even that maybe 40 minutes or half an hour before iftar, that they'll sit down and recite together things. I've seen this across the U.S.
But a parrot could recite the Quran.
Sure. And I think that what is the thing to really take home for converts, not that they should, I'm not suggesting don't spend time reciting Quran, don't spend time reciting it in the Arabic or other things like this, but ensuring that you have gained understanding by the end of the month of even one ayat of the Quran, particularly one, I think, pertaining to the master of the age, Muhammad alayhi salam, is something that is going to be more beneficial than if you recited the Quran a dozen times
Yeah,
in the Arabic.
I believe so.
You know, we have, mashallah, there's a lot of wonderful Quran reciters from so-called Saudi Arabia. However, their connection with the Quran, even though they may recite it beautifully, may have some problems because of the Imam of their age that they follow.
Sure.
So, by developing a closer relationship, in my mind, I think what's most important is, even if you start small, or even just look at one surah, or within that, one or two ayat, or something like this, and ponder over not just its apparent meaning and that application of that to your life, although there's some beautiful stories and things like this in the Quran. They're there for a reason, so that you learn from mistakes of past peoples, things like this. But that if we make it the focus or the goal or our niyyah during that month to gain closeness with the Imam, that this is also the best way for us to gain closeness with the Quran and with Allah Azza wa Jal. We only have about 5 minutes left before we have to wrap up our final Ramadan episode. I guess, I don't know, we can take turns with some closing thoughts, but
Well, my closing thoughts are essentially, again, a call to the community for a degree of activism here and a degree of trying to solidify our identity as the Shia, inshallah ta'ala, of Ala Muhammad. For whilst we are a community that claims to be the Shia, we identify ourselves with the label Shia. We are nothing but muhibbeen of Ala Muhammad. We are nothing but lovers of Ala Muhammad. And we should fall short of the right to even call ourselves Shia, especially in the way that we are treating the convert community at large, or communities of believers who do not belong to the same ethnic or cultural group as us. We find that the convert finds himself in this unique, or herself in this unique situation, and they may be thinking to themselves that, you know, if I'm doing everything that's in the books and I've adopted the right creed, you know, if I meet the qualifications to be a Muslim,
Yeah.
and you reject me, I'm asking you why. You know, it's not. It's something they have the right to ask metaphorically in their heads, and we believe here that it is necessary for the community to take a more active role in facilitating for not only the converts of the community but for their own children. Do you want your children to grow up believing that this religion is merely a part and parcel of their culture, or do you want to solidify them with a genuinely Islamic identity? There's a narration ascribed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and to be fair, my teachers have said that they've not yet found a source for this narration, but it is popularly ascribed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, in which Amir al-Mu'mineen has said, alayhi salam, do not raise your children according to the way you were raised, for times are different. And we see that times are changing. Everything is changing, and now we live in an era in which the modern world wishes to take us away from anything meaningful, anything spiritual, and place us into a concrete urban jungle in which all that is important to us is technological and financial prosperity. We see that these things create the massive obstacle for a month like Shahr Ramadan to install any genuine change. For what is the month of Ramadan if all it is a 1 month break from the sojourn of the believer into the world of the material? No, we believe that Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed this month for numerous spiritual benefits, including health and physical benefits, but many spiritual benefits. And one of these spiritual benefits is the benefit of reuniting yourself, rekindling the fire of a relationship between yourself and Allah Azza wa Jal, the relationship with the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal as well, the Quran, and more importantly, your relationship with the Ma'sumin. This is the month in which Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was martyred. And all we get out of this month is we have some people doing some latmiyah for Amir al-Mu'mineen. They recite the Maktal of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yet these people do not come to understand the spirit of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The spirit that Amir al-Mu'mineen used to have when it came to people of other religions, people of other communities, people of a less prosperous economic background. What is the point of crying over Amir al-Mu'mineen, doing all the amal in the name of Amir al-Mu'mineen, if you are going to abandon the complete spirit of Amir al-Mu'mineen, as we said? And this is why, you know, when you have non-Muslim writers, they can study the khulafa of the so-called khulafa of other sects, but none of them will ever refer to, say, the second tyrant as the voice of human justice. They would refer to him in other means. No one would ever write a book claiming that, or the UN will never write a document saying that we should use the Pact of the Second Tyrant, which is a historical document and still exists, as a document for the success of the Arab world. No one would ever refer back to the documents of the Second Tyrant or any of the other figures of Islamic history who are ascribed as being great and are not from the Ahlul Bayt. No one would ever use them in the same way Amir al-Mu'mineen has been used. For example, the United Nations Human Development Report for the Middle East of the year 2004. No one would ever use anyone other than Amir al-Mu'mineen. And look at us. We talk about using Amir al-Mu'mineen for human development. The United Nations wants to do this, and yet we, the Shia, have no human development arising from our connection with Amir al-Mu'mineen.
Well, I guess my last thoughts would really be, at least in terms of addressing the convert community, to maintain patience and a lot of patience and strength during the month, and that's what's going to get you through it. Making that connection, like we've talked about with the Imam of our time, with the Holy Quran, and realizing that the adversity that they face, not just in Ramadan, but in any month, is something that's not being faced alone, that everyone, all converts struggle with adversity at some point. And of course, no one struggles with more adversity than the Imam of our time. So, inshallah, patience will develop during the month, will get you through the month, and that they're able to take advantage of the blessings of the month as much as possible by developing their relationship with Ali Muhammad, peace be upon them all. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of The Convertsation. Inshallah, you'll have blessed Ramadan and a very pleasant Eid celebration as well, inshallah. Please continue to join us for more episodes. If in the future, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can email us at the contact information posted on the screen. In the meantime, please stay with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.